There are moments in a nation's history when time seems to pause, when all the noise, all the shouting, all the distractions fade away, and the truth stands alone in the light. This is one of those moments. You can feel it in the air, in the trembling uncertainty of a country that's been tested and divided. You can sense it in the silence between words. People wonder whether their leaders still remember who they serve. And in that silence, the truth waits, patient but unrelenting, asking only one question: who will rise to defend it? Because power, my friends, does not define truth. Truth defines power. You can hold the highest office in the land, stand behind the strongest podium, and speak into the loudest microphone. But if your words are empty of honesty, they crumble the moment they touch history. And history, no matter how long it takes, always finds out who stood for something real and who merely performed for applause. That is the weight of this moment, the realization that no title, no wealth, no cheering crowd can shield a man from the truth he's tried to bury. For years, we've seen what happens when leadership is traded for spectacle, when responsibility is replaced by resentment, when a man confuses the presidency with a stage and the people's pain with a prop. You can divide, you can distort, you can blame. You can distort, you can blame, turns. And when it does, it doesn't reflect the slogans or the rallies. It reflects the damage done to a nation's soul. That's what this moment represents. A reckoning not between two men, but between two visions of what America can be. One vision feeds on fear, on the illusion that power comes from domination, by tearing others down, by silencing dissent, by pretending that cruelty is strength. The other vision stands on the quiet, steady truth that real strength comes from service, from decency, from the willingness to admit mistakes, to learn to grow, to rise. And I've seen this nation rise. I've seen it in the eyes of parents who lost their jobs, but never lost their faith in the promise of a better day. I've seen it in young people marching for justice when the streets were cold and the world looked away. America's strength was never built on ego. It was built on endurance. But the dangerous thing about lies is that they don't just corrode the liar. They corrode everyone who believes them. When the highest office in the land becomes a theater for deception, it invites the people to distrust everything. Institutions falter. Truth itself becomes negotiable. And once that happens, democracy starts to suffocate under the weight of its own confusion. That's why this moment matters. Because when one leader poisons the water, it takes all of us to cleanse it again. It takes courage, not convenience, to restore what's been lost. There's a certain kind of silence that follows truth. It's not comfortable, but it's necessary. It's the silence of recognition, when a man realizes he went too far, said too much, or betrayed too many. You can see that silence in the eyes of anyone who built their kingdom on lies. They may still speak, but their words no longer carry the same power, because truth, once spoken, cannot be unheard. And that's the power of this moment. It doesn't shout. It reveals. It exposes what ego tried to hide. History remembers moments like this not for their noise, but for their clarity. It remembers the day when the show ended and the substance returned. When the people looked past the curtain of chaos and saw the difference between arrogance and leadership. It remembers when a nation rediscovered its moral compass, not because someone demanded it, but because the truth made denial impossible. That's where we stand now, on the edge of accountability, with the future watching. And so, to those who chose deception over duty, I say this: regret will come. It always does. Because time has a way of humbling those who believe they could outlast the truth. But for those who chose courage, who still believe that words can heal, that decency can win, that America can rise again, this is your moment too. This is your call to remember that democracy isn't inherited. It's defended, not by anger, but by conviction. Not by division, but by the will to unite again. The weight of this moment is heavy because it carries not just the burden of the past, but the hope of the future. We stand between what was and what can still be. And the question before us is simple. Will we let lies define us, or will we rise to define the truth? Because once the truth is spoken, once the veil is lifted, there's no turning back. And so we begin, not in vengeance, but in clarity. Not to destroy, but to rebuild. This is the reckoning, the return, the comeback moment. And as this story unfolds, the truth will move from the shadows into the light, demanding more from each of us, and preparing the ground for what comes next, the battle for America's soul. There comes a time in every nation's story when the battle is no longer fought on battlefields, but in the hearts of its people. That's where America stands today. Not in a war of weapons, but in a war of words, values, and visions. The question before us is not whether we can build walls or lower taxes. It's whether we still believe in the moral promise that made this country possible. Because when truth is under siege and decency is mocked, the battle for America's soul begins. For years, we have watched a leader use fear like a weapon, turning American against American, turning compassion into weakness and empathy into a punchline. He told us that greatness was about winning at all costs. That strength was about humiliating others. That patriotism meant loyalty to one man instead of the principles that built this republic. But deep down, we know that's not who we are. Greatness was never about the size of our crowds. It was about the size of our hearts. The soul of America has always been fragile because it's built on faith. Faith that we can be better than our worst instincts. That faith was tested when hate was given a microphone, when cruelty became currency, and when lies were treated as truth simply because they were loud enough. But through every trial, America's soul has refused to die. It endures in the quiet acts of goodness, the nurse who stays an extra shift, the teacher who refuses to give up on a child, the citizen who votes not out of anger, but out of hope. Those people are the heartbeat of this nation. You see, the fight for America's soul isn't just about politics, it's about character. It's about whether we still recognize one another as human beings. Because when leaders choose division, it's the people who bleed. When truth is abandoned, it's the people who suffer. And when decency is mocked from the highest office in the land, it's the people who must remind their leaders what decency means. Power without purpose corrupts, and corruption, when left unchallenged, begins to rewrite a nation's story. History has seen this before. We've seen demagogues rise by sowing fear, by promising strength while preying on weakness. We've seen moments when America's faith in itself seemed to falter. But each time, something stronger rose from the ashes. Citizens who refused to let hate define their future. From Selma to Stonewall, from the Dust Bowl to Detroit, this country has been rebuilt again and again by those who understood that democracy demands moral courage. The question is, do we still have that courage today? When I speak of a battle for the soul, I'm not speaking in poetry, I'm speaking in warning. Because once a nation loses its moral compass, it doesn't just lose its way, it loses its identity. You can have the strongest economy, the mightiest army, the loudest voice, but without soul, without compassion, without truth, you're just a shadow of what you once were. That's what's at stake now. This isn't about left or right. It's about right and wrong. It's about whether we still believe that character matters more than celebrity. And yes, there are those who will say, this is naive, that politics is a dirty game, that morality has no place in it. But tell that to the families torn apart by injustice. Tell that to the veterans who fought for freedom only to see it sold for ratings. Tell that to the young people watching all this chaos and wondering if their country still deserves their hope. Morality is not a weakness. It is the only strength that endures when power fades. And if we forget that, we lose the very thing that makes America worth defending. This nation was not built on fear. It was built on faith. Faith that out of many, we could be one. Faith that no matter how deep the division, truth would always find a way through. And that faith, though shaken, is not gone. You can't silence a nation's soul. You can try to distract it, distort it, divide it, but eventually it breaks through the noise. Because the American spirit doesn't surrender. It remembers who we were, who we are, and who we must become again. The battle for America's soul isn't one with applause or slogans. It's one with action. It's one in classrooms and communities, in ballots and in conversations. It's one when we choose empathy over ego, truth over comfort, courage over convenience. And tonight I say this not as a politician, but as a fellow citizen. We cannot wait for another savior. We are the ones we've been waiting for. So yes, there is a battle being fought. It's not on television. It's in our choices, our words, our hearts. And as the noise of division grows louder, our responsibility grows greater. Because what we decide now will echo for generations. The test of our time is not whether we win politically. It's whether we keep our humanity intact. And that's where we must go next, toward the truth itself. Because no nation can reclaim its soul if it forgets what truth means. And that is the struggle before us in the next chapter, when truth becomes the enemy. There's a danger greater than any enemy we can face beyond our borders. And that's the enemy we create within. It begins quietly, almost invisibly, when a nation starts to doubt its own truth. When facts become optional, when lies are packaged as patriotism, when the truth itself is treated as an inconvenience rather than a compass, that's when a country starts to lose not just its direction, but its soul. And today, we are standing on that edge. There was a time when truth was our foundation. Not a matter of debate. It was the thing that bound us together, Democrat or Republican, conservative or liberal. We could argue policy, we could fight over ideas, but we still believed in the same reality. But then came a voice that said truth didn't matter, that facts were whatever the powerful declared them to be. That belief, repeated often enough, has become a poison in the bloodstream of this democracy. And if we don't fight it, it will destroy us from within. We have watched what happens when leaders treat truth like an enemy. When they dismiss science, mock integrity, and label honest journalism as a fake. That's not strength, it's insecurity masquerading as power. Because real strength doesn't fear accountability. Real leadership doesn't hide behind lies. It stands tall, in the light of truth, no matter how uncomfortable. Because it knows that a house built on deception will one day collapse under its own weight. And those who follow the lie will be buried beneath the rubble of their own denial. Truth has always been America's secret weapon. It was truth that gave courage to those who marched for freedom, knowing that moral clarity could outlast violence. It was truth that guided Lincoln through the storm of Civil War, reminding him that the Union's purpose was not just preservation, but justice. It was truth that made generations of Americans believe that even when this country stumbled, it could still stand up again. That's the truth we're called to defend now. Not because it's comfortable, but because it's necessary. But when truth becomes the enemy, those who speak it become targets. We've seen it. Whistleblowers smeared, journalists threatened, citizens silenced for daring to ask hard questions. And we're told that to love our country, we must close our eyes to its faults. But real patriotism doesn't hide the cracks. It repairs them. Real love for America doesn't mean pretending we're perfect. It means refusing to give up when we fall short. If speaking truth makes you an enemy of the powerful, then maybe the powerful have something to fear. There is a cost to silence. Every time a lie goes unchallenged, it grows stronger. Every time a truth is ignored, the foundation weakens. And soon, we find ourselves surrounded by walls of our own making. Walls not of stone, but of deceit. You can't build a nation on those walls. You can't raise a child to believe in something that doesn't exist. The danger of this moment is not just that we've been lied to, it's that some of us have grown comfortable with it. Because the truth demands something of us. It asks for courage. It demands accountability. It calls us to change. We must remember that truth is not a weapon to be wielded against our enemies. It's a light to guide us home. It doesn't belong to one party, one president, or one ideology. It belongs to the people. It belongs to the mother who teaches her son to tell the truth even when it hurts. It belongs to the worker who refuses to cheat even when no one's watching. It belongs to the voter who believes their voice still matters, no matter how small. That's where truth lives, in ordinary people who refuse to surrender their integrity. You see, the lie can win for a moment, but the truth always wins in the end. It may be buried, distorted, mocked, but it never dies. History has a way of exposing the false prophets, of stripping away their arrogance until only their emptiness remains. That is the fate awaiting those who believe they could bend truth to their will. Because no matter how loud the deception, the whisper of truth is eternal. And it always finds a way to be heard. So yes, we live in a time when truth has been treated as the enemy. But I believe this, the American people still recognize it when they hear it. Deep down, beyond the noise, beyond the partisanship, there's a longing to come back to something real, to trust again, to believe again, to rebuild a country where words mean something and leaders stand for more than themselves. That's where our comeback begins, not in power, but in honesty. Because when truth returns, it brings with it responsibility. It calls each of us to look in the mirror and ask, what part did I play? What part can I heal? And that leads us forward to a deeper test of leadership, of character, of duty. The next chapter of this story asks a question every leader must answer. What is the true power of responsibility? Power is a dangerous thing when it's misunderstood. Too many believe that power is about control, about bending others to your will, about dominating the conversation, the news cycle, the world around you. But power without responsibility is corruption in its purest form. The real strength of leadership doesn't come from how much you can take. It comes from how much you're willing to give. It's the understanding that when the people place their trust in you, they are not giving you permission to rule. They're giving you the sacred duty to serve. That's what responsibility means. Service over self. The office you hold, the authority you command, the influence you wield, all of it exists for one purpose: to uplift the people you represent. But somewhere along the way, that purpose was lost. We watched a leader mistake the Oval Office for a mirror, a place to admire his reflection instead of reflect on his duty.
We watched a man confuse attention for achievement, noise for impact, and ego for strength. That's not leadership. That's indulgence dressed up as destiny.
Every president inherits not just a nation, but a moral obligation to carry forward the trust of those who came before and to protect the promise of those who will follow. You are not the owner of that office. You are its custodian. You hold it for a moment in time, and then you pass it on, either cleaner or more corrupted than you found it. Responsibility means leaving behind something greater than yourself. It's understanding that history will not ask how loud you were. It will ask how faithful you were to the truth. I've seen what real responsibility looks like. It's the firefighter who runs into a burning building while others run out. It's the teacher who stays late after class because one child still doesn't understand. It's the doctor who works through exhaustion because someone's life depends on it. None of these people have power in the political sense, but they carry more responsibility than most leaders ever will. And that's why people trust them. Because responsibility is the highest form of power. It's power rooted in compassion, not control. When responsibility is abandoned, the nation suffers. We saw what happens when leaders choose loyalty to themselves over duty to the people. When truth is sacrificed for convenience. When division is easier than courage. And when those in power forget that their words shape more than headlines, they shape hearts, they shape futures. Because every careless word from the powerful gives permission for cruelty to spread. That's the cost of irresponsibility. It multiplies, it infects, it destroys trust brick by brick. Responsibility means restraint. It means understanding that leadership is not about doing what's easy. It's about doing what's right, especially when no one's watching. It's about listening more than speaking, learning more than boasting. Some people think leadership is about never admitting fault. But I've learned that admitting fault is what makes leadership possible. When a president refuses to be accountable, the truth suffers. And when truth suffers, the people lose faith. Not just in the man, but in the very system that man represents. You see, true responsibility doesn't end when the cameras turn off. It's tested in the quiet hours, in the decisions no one sees, in the policies that will outlive the moment. It's the measure of a person's character when power no longer protects them. When the applause fades, when history begins to write its judgment. Judgment, make no mistake, history always writes with clarity. You can deceive the people for a time, but not forever. Because responsibility, like truth, always finds its reckoning. There's a reason the founders warned against tyranny. They knew that unchecked power corrodes the soul of a nation. They built a system designed to make responsibility the foundation of freedom, because freedom without responsibility is just chaos wearing a flag. That's what we've seen too much of in recent years. Chaos sold as patriotism, selfishness disguised as strength. But responsibility calls us back to balance, to humility, to the higher standard that democracy demands of its leaders. And for those who refuse that calling, there will come a day when they must answer for it. The title will be gone. The cameras will move on, and all that will remain is the question: did you do right by the people? For one leader in particular, that question will echo louder than any rally chant, any headline, any defense. Because when power fades, responsibility is the only legacy left standing. And history has already begun to render its verdict. But responsibility does not end with those who lead. It belongs to all of us. We have a duty to hold truth above party, to hold character above convenience, to demand integrity not as a luxury, but as a standard. Because if we fail to do that, then we, too become complicit in the decay we condemn. This democracy has never survived on the shoulders of one man. It has survived on the collective courage of millions who took responsibility for its future. And that is where we stand now, on the edge of choosing once again who we will be. Will we hide behind blame, or will we rise into accountability? The path forward begins when each of us accepts our share of the burden and our share of the hope. Because when responsibility is reclaimed, so too is the power to heal what's been broken. And that, my friends, leads us to the next truth we must confront: the cost of division.